So let's talk about how to practice. We spent the last couple lessons looking at the big high level stuff. Like, what are your options if you're going to learn to improvise or write music or whatever else? Now let's look at the details. If you're going to sit down and practice for 2 hours, how do you make sure that at the end of that 2 hours, you are better than when you started? So I want this to be a good bit more concrete than the previous stuff. So to help with that, I want to just focus on one thing. We'll assume that you're a piano player and you're going to find sheet music and you're going to read it and memorize it and perform it, and you're going to try to perform it really well. We'll worry about, improv and writing music and figuring things out by ear. We'll deal with that in a later lesson. For now, we'll just focus on this. So, the first important thing to understand about figuring out your practice routine is that you don't really want a routine, at least not in the traditional sense. You use a routine when you go to the gym. And you can go to the gym and bench press and deadlift, and you can do that over and over. And that works. That's fine. Your muscles are dumb. You just lift heavy stuff and you'll get stronger. But music is complex and open-ended, and it's part mental and it's part physical and a million other things. So you want to approach music more like the way you play a game. Think of one of those big open world games like Skyrim or The Witcher or even like D&D or something. For a game to work, you need a quest. You need some big, grand thing that you're going to go after. And at first you're like this weak little character and you can't do it, but you're gonna go fight stuff and get stronger, and eventually you'll be able to conquer that quest. So step one is to find your quest. Pick an actual piece of music that you one day want to be able to play, something you care about, something you think is awesome. Don't worry about how hard it is. Don't worry about how long it might take. This will probably change later. It doesn't matter. You just need this goal. So a lot of people will pick the Moonlight Sonata, super popular piece. Everybody loves it. So that's a great quest to go after. You could play that Chopin Nocturne that we looked at, or some crazy Liszt piece, or it doesn't have to be classical. It could be something like a song from The Nightmare Before Christmas, or your favorite Ben Folds piece. Doesn't matter, just something you want to learn. So once you have that, and if you can't think of something, go figure it out. Spend a week listening to music, or a month, just whatever you have to do to find this piece that you love, that you care about. So once you have it, find the music, print it out, and I mean actual paper, not a computer screen, not an iPad, but actual paper, and then put it in front of you. So let's just pretend that you're going to learn. Here it is. Pretend you're going to learn that Chopin Nocturne. Okay? So you put this in front of you. You say, okay, I am going to try this. Now that sounds ridiculous. You don't know how to play yet. This is super complicated. Doesn't matter. This is important. You're going to try it. You say, okay, you take a stab at it. And I don't even know what that first note is. And even if I did, I wouldn't know where to put it on my piano. I mean, if you're a beginner, then you don't know this stuff. That's okay. That's perfect. In fact, you've just identified two very concrete, simple things that you need to go learn. And that's step one. So you're thinking, I got to learn how to read notes, and I got to learn where to put them on my piano. So you go look it up. You go, find some little chart that shows you what all the notes are. Or maybe a chart isn't quite enough and you need an article that explains it, or you need to find a video that breaks it down. You figure out what you need, but you know what you're after. You're going to try to figure out, how do I know what notes these are? And same thing for the piano. So once you have that information, you can kind of come back to this and say, all right, I can start figuring out notes, but real quickly you'll realize, all right, this is super complicated. And there's a lot of other stuff going on. There's all these crazy lines and symbols and numbers, and I don't really know what's going on. But I know that I need to learn how to read notes, so let me go find something that's going to let me work on that skill that I figured out. Now you may think, well, duh, like I knew I needed to start somewhere simpler from the beginning. This was a waste of time. But now you know what you're after. You've identified this thing that you need to go work on. So you're not just going to go blindly pick some piece of music and say, I'm going to try to learn this and hope that it helps me. You're going to find something that helps you with this skill that you know you need. So say you run across or you find a piece like this, just some little kid's thing. You'll think, that looks pretty good. There's a bunch of notes, but it's pretty simple. There's not a whole bunch of crazy stuff. So I could sit here and I could work through this, and this would probably help me figure out what all the notes are. And that's perfect. Think of this like a little side quest, some little easy monster that you're going to go after. So you start working on this, you start, figuring out the notes and developing this skill, and you'll run into some things that you don't know how to deal with. Like, hey, there's this little hashtag on my music. What does that mean? So you'll go look that up, find, okay, that's a sharp, and there's this other thing called a flat, and there's this whole little system there. So that's clearly something I'm going to have to figure out. So maybe once you're done with this piece, you go find another piece that helps you work on these little sharps and flats, and you kind of chase down that little rabbit hole. And you're really just going to do this whole little series of side quests and start to figure out and identify all these little bits of music or things that you have to go learn. Now, contrast that to just blindly picking stuff. Say you run across a piece like this, right? And so you start to play it and you say you're thinking, all right, this should help me read. But as you play through it, you realize, like, hey, actually, this is just some little pattern. Like, it just repeats over and over, and it just kind of goes up and then goes back down. So I had to read the first few notes, but after that, like, I'm just following a pattern. I'm not really reading anymore. So clearly, this isn't helping with that goal. Like, you chose this piece because you know you need to learn how to read, but this one's not helping with that. Think, well, this, obviously it's some kind of exercise, it says that, but you'll think, this isn't helping me with what I've identified. This is trying to teach me some other thing that I haven't really figured out yet. So you would want to just shelve this, because you might be thinking, hey, I should learn everything. I should learn what chords are, and I should learn exercises and things like that. But you don't know how this fits in yet. Like, this is clearly some little exercise to teach you how to do something with your hand. But say you're working on this piece, right? Getting a handle on how to read, and you get to say this part where there's a bunch of little notes jumping around, and you realize, hey, this is hard to physically play. You would want to figure out, why exactly is it hard to play? I have to do these little jumps with my fingers. Maybe it's this particular part where I have to switch my fingers, or how I have to play these 3 little last notes really fast. But you'll figure out these very specific things that you need to work on, and then you'll find something that helps you accomplish that. So it might be some exercise, it may just be something you make up, but you have some very specific thing in your head, like, this is the problem that I need to solve. If you just take an exercise like this, you don't really know what it is you're trying to work on. It's just some random thing that you do with your fingers, and this is the kind of thing that's very easy to just sit there and spend lots of time on doing over and over, and it's not really clear how that fits in with actual real music that you're going to try to play. So you would just save this for if you eventually figure out, hey, this is a real thing that I got to do. I'm gonna sit here and practice this and try to develop that skill. So the main point here that I'm trying to get to is that when you practice, there are 2 things that you will focus on, and this is really the essence of what you do with your practice time. The first is that you want to start to identify the different skills you need. And you'll wind up finding these big, broad categories at first. It's sort of like in a game, like you have strength and intelligence and magicka and all this stuff. In music, there's stuff like recognizing notes and you're reading sheet music and finding them on your piano and then remembering things and your physical ability to play. So you'll find these big broad categories. Now, let me just write that out real quick. And you may wind up with a completely different set of categories. It doesn't matter. In fact, you really should be trying to find this stuff yourself. But say you find these things, then you'll start to drill down into the recognizing notes part and realize that there's all these little subcategories in here too. So say you're working on this piece again. You may realize, hey, I'm pretty good at reading notes when they're up here in the treble clef, but when they're down in the bass clef, that's a bit harder for me. Like that is slowing me down. So you'll say that the subcategories are reading treble clef notes and reading bass clef notes. Or you may realize, hey, when the notes are here, it's fine. When they get up above the staff, like on these little lines on top, like I always get stuck on that. That takes me a long time to read. So you'll think, okay, that's this little subcategory of skill that I've identified that I need to work on. And you'll find things like that, as you get into finding notes on your instrument. You'll find certain areas where you get stuck, or your memory is a huge one that you'll find issues with. Or of course, playing things. You might realize, hey, I'm pretty okay with, playing these notes when they're just sequential, but I have a hard time stretching out and playing, these big wide chords, or when there's a bunch of notes really fast, like that's difficult, or these big jumps. And you'll wind up with all these little subcategories of skills over here. Now, the second piece, the second part of this is that once you've identified these little things, you want to be able to isolate them and draw your focus down into this one thing that you need to get good at. If you think about just sitting there reading a piece, obviously this is super complicated. There's a lot going on. But the majority of this, once you have a decent handle on reading, the majority of this won't be too bad. There'll be these very particular things that slow you down and keep you from getting through it, like finding the notes that are up really high, or some subtle little rhythms in here. And you don't want to do what most people do, which is to just sit there and just play it over and over and just kind of do everything all at once. Most people will put a piece in front of them and they'll just kind of play it, and they'll hope that they're remembering it, and they're not really ever practicing it. They're just kind of playing it over and over. And it's like they're working on every single skill all at once. And most of the time, they don't get super far. There's simple little things that are holding them back. So you want to identify those things. And like I said, you do that by chasing down these other little pathways and finding them and isolating them. And then you want to focus on them, figure out where you're having problems, and solve them. And that is really the essence of how you spend your practice time. Now, there is a little bit of a routine-like aspect to this, or at least in the sense where you probably do want to divide your time into different categories. So, obviously at the beginning here, you wind up spending a lot of time just having to recognize notes. That's kind of the first thing you need. You can't really focus on playing until you have some notes in your head. But as you improve, like your focus will begin to shift. Your recognizing notes becomes much easier, and you'll shift more time into playing things. And what you would usually want to do, keeping in mind like this is your big quest that you're after, you will probably realize like, hey, I know I'm struggling with reading notes. That's a major skill that I need to work on. But obviously, I'm going to have to work on remembering everything. And it's very difficult with this piece. It's very hard to get to a point where I can really focus on the memory because there's way too many other issues going on at the same time. So rather than, sit here and work on some very simple little piece just to help with note reading, I want to pick a piece, a side quest that's difficult. Not something like this crazy one, but something that I can take from start to finish, and I can work on these other stages, and I don't just sit here and only focus on this first thing. So say you find a piece like this. This is a Philip Glass piece. Relatively simple. You can kind of see that, like, okay, there's some notes and they hold out, but there's not really that much going on. And there's a couple pages, but they're mostly the same. And you could realize, okay, this is the kind of piece, this is kind of that medium difficulty that I could take from start to finish. I could recognize the notes and then find them and then focus on remembering them and then eventually focus on playing them and all that stuff. And this will let you get into these later stages and start to figure out, okay, what are the skills that I need over here and what is this whole process like? And so you'll start to figure out, the bigger picture. You're not just stuck here at the beginning. So the routine-ish part of this is that you may spend some of your time focusing on this skill, the recognizing notes part. You'll think, I know I got to get better at this, so I'll sit there and play stuff. But this is a very mental, intellectual skill. I'll use that as an example. You're sitting there figuring out notes and you're trying to get, improve your ability to remember them, and you'll probably realize like, hey, it takes a ton of time if I have to sit here and go, every good boy does fine every time. So I got to focus on just recognizing the note right away, not having to count through it. And that's a very mental process. And it's very likely that you'll get fatigued on that, or at least you'll kind of reach the end of where that's productive. And so you may want to spend some time just focusing on the playing. Like you'll have some piece you're working on, like say this one, you'll think, I just want to focus on playing this and work on the physical aspects. And you'll end up kind of splitting your time into these different categories of focusing on memory, focusing on physical performance, and just moving between them based on how you feel, or even just like as a general principle, when you sit down and you want a complete day of practice, you'll kind of split your time between them. The important thing though, the difference between sitting down and working up some routine of 20 minutes of scales and 15 minutes of exercises and whatever of sight reading, is that you are the protagonist. You're the decision maker. You're going to start down some path and you're going to hit obstacles and think, there's all these skills that I don't have yet and I need to go find them. What you don't want to do is just blindly do things and hope that they get you to your goal. So an important kind of side note here is that you may think, I don't really want to do that. Like that sounds like a messy, kind of frustrating process. I'll just find a teacher and pay them and they can just tell me what to do. Or I'll find a book and I'll just start at lesson 1 and go all the way through, and that will just walk me through all the things I need to know. But here's the thing. No teacher or book or anything can get inside your head and find the little mental problems that aren't quite figured out. Like you are the one who realizes, hey, I have trouble when notes are up here or down here. This particular rhythm is tripping me up. Or like no one else can feel what you feel in your fingers or in your hands and arms and think, hey, when I try to play this little run in this song, like there's this one little part that just doesn't feel right, and that's what I gotta figure out and work on. Nobody can do that. A teacher can help you. A book can help you. But that's all it is. It's just help. You're sitting there struggling on your path and they might help you get unstuck, or they might give you some insight that helps you get past something. But ultimately, you're the one making the decisions. You're the one deciding, hey, this is the most important thing that I need to spend my time on right now. And you're the one saying, hey, I've been doing this for like 10 minutes and I'm not getting anywhere. This is not helping me and I ought to spend my time somewhere else. So basically, you will orchestrate your practice time. You will decide where your time should go and where it isn't. And one of the skills you're going to be good at is recognizing when you're being productive and when you're not. In fact, that's probably the most vital skill, is realizing where you're spending your time and whether that's helping you or it isn't. So one more thing that I want to close with here. Your practice routine, what you do with your day when you're trying to learn music, it needs to be fun. And I say needs to, and I mean that. You may think, well, yeah, it'd be better if I'm enjoying myself, but I don't mind having to grind it out sometimes, or just, I don't really care if it isn't that fun. But when you're engaged, when you're enjoying yourself, you learn so much better. It's just a simple reality of how our minds work. That if something is interesting and exciting, your brain just gets into it and hangs on to it, and it's something you learn. So you should treat music not as this thing that you grind out every day or this schedule you have to keep. Like I said, it's not like going to the gym. It's like this adventure. It's like this game you're going to play. You're going to go on a quest, and you're going to get stuck, and you'll think, okay, I got to go do something else, but I'll come back to this, and I'll be stronger. I'm going to go work on this thing, and that's going to level me up and make me better. And you'll keep making these decisions. It's a very active process. And you may think, I'd rather just follow a book. I'd rather just sign up for a class and go through lesson 1 and lesson 2 and get there that way. And to be honest, I've never really seen anyone make it that far with that kind of approach. You can make some progress, but eventually you will stagnate, because playing music is a creative process. It really is. You have to creatively problem solve. You have to figure out, hey, there's this particular little part of this song that I get stuck on and I can't quite make my hand do the right thing. And why is that? And what actual physical thing is tripping me up? And how do I work on that? And you'll have to take this creative approach. So embrace that, I guess, is what I'm saying. Like, you're the one making these decisions. Make them and enjoy it and have fun. Don't just follow the formula, because honestly, that won't really get you there. I've seen that time and time again. So I'm going to leave it at that. Of course, in future lessons, we'll get into all these little things about remembering things and memory and performance and all that kind of stuff. But for now, take this as the big picture and feel good about it and enjoy playing music. I think that's the big message here. So thanks for watching, especially if you made it through all 3 of these videos. Let me know if you have questions and comments. Check out Patreon if you want to support. Otherwise, I will see you in the next lesson.